An august admiral and white-themed Reploid sat quietly in a metallic cubital armchair. The abrupt overhang of his seat's left arm was gently overlaid by the trunk-like white fingers of his left hand while he held a mission report with his right. His figure was immense, and the design of his armor was akin to that of formal military officer's attire. His figure dwarfed most others of his kind, and his austere appearance was as imposing as his demeanor. As he silently read the text presented upon the tablet, he appeared as a memorial to a great leader. The solid construction of his desk and armchair complemented that of his own, making him appear all the more outwardly firm as he was inwardly resolute. "The mission was a success," Cygnus finally commented. "Are you sure you don't see anything the least bit concerning?" A man seated across from him scrutinized. "I will admit that Zero's method of dispatching the Maverick was slightly excessive." "Slightly?" the man replied in surprise. "The mission was to disable the Maverick, and Zero cut it to pieces." "And he did disable it." The man had crossed his arms and raised an eyebrow in criticism, displaying that he was not impressed. "Look," defended Cygnus. "Caused by virus or not, reintegration into social service of post-Maverick Reploids is oftentimes unsuccessful. Most clients don't want a dangerous machine welcomed into their homes, or anywhere else they may be forced with working around them. And so they're either ostracized or decommissioned," the man censored. "Or become repeat offenders," as Cygnus added. "When a Maverick label is applied to any Reploid, resistance to hunter intervention often results in situations like this. Mostly when Zero's involved. And who do you think is the most effective at quelling uprisings with the least collateral damage? While compromising the functionality of the target resisted. And why do you think most Mavericks fight back when confronted with hunters? They are built to function and think just as humans do. When peaceful methods are met with violence, even human law enforcers are authorized to use deadly force," Cygnus replied calmly, his visitor was starting to lose his patience. "However, following such a metaphor, you simply call in the one-bot SWAT team for something as trivial as a domestic disturbance. Maverick Reploids are capable of far more damage than humans in such cases. Regardless," the man had waved his arm in the air impatiently, "my point is the Sigma virus is no more. And just how sure are you of that statement? Remember, Sigma is a sentient virus capable of altering its data encryption, and even manipulating Reploid manufacturing plants to build his new bodies. His last appearance was through Luminae." "Luminae, yes," Cygnus replied reverentially. "I personally thought it was a mistake for the humans to designate a Reploid to be in charge of the lunar elevator. I felt that such an incident might happen. However, we are subservient to their will. The only major difference between a Reploid's compliance and the Maverick designation is that understanding. While I was somewhat surprised Sigma was ultimately involved in that incident, whether or not he was in control, no one really knows. What of the Giga City incident? Sigma may have been involved. I never knew Redips, and I only communicated with him for a short time. I do know, however, that he was created shortly after the Repliforce debacle." "Yes, Repliforce and Redips, and any other case in which the involvement of the Sigma virus is questionable. Has it occurred to you that, just like humans, Reploid crime might be provoked through extenuating circumstance rather than internal flaws?" "I'm not surprised a man like you would make such an argument. Still, would you disagree? What exactly are you getting at, Mr. Lansky?" "It should seem obvious that resistance brought on by any knowledge of being hunted is an all-too-understandable reaction, especially by your private subordinate. Because of this, I fear that Zero may just prove to be a menace to order. I really believe that his methods scare Reploids whom are remotely suspicious of being labeled as Mavericks. As a result, their actions are perceived as extreme when in fact they're only panicked movements of self-preservation. You know most certainly that the mark of being Maverick results in little more than the form of a witch hunt." Cygnus was now leaning to the side in his chair, resting an elbow upon its left arm, rubbing his chin in contemplation. "Please grant me permission to investigate Zero. I know he won't speak with me personally, but let me research his past. After all, it's public knowledge that he was once guilty of Maverick activity, and I want to determine for myself if his actions might be indicative of some latent Maverick tendency. As you said, past Mavericks tend to be repeat offenders." Cygnus looked intently at the man sitting across from him. "All right. Since you are so persistent on your position, I'll grant you access to our records." "Thank you, Cygnus. I knew you would understand." "I never said I did. I will admit that Zero has been rather messy, but if you look at the kinds of messes from our little wars with Mavericks, you'll find that even his actions have kept the recovering world clean." The man concluded his meeting with the Reploid commander and rose from the metal armchair before his desk. He then left the office, allowing the automatic door to slide closed behind him. After he had left, Cygnus shook his head and sighed at the daftness of the man who had recently sat before him. Darrel Lansky was a practicing psychotherapist who recently became a major proponent in the argument that the Reploid mind is truly similar to humans, and that the occurrence of neurosis was similar within the electronic mind as that of the organic. He stated that if given enough time, any Reploid who is employed by a human family, as many already were, would eventually be seen as an added and valued member of that family. He supported this proposition by presenting many cases in which either a long-time employed Reploid either went maverick or was reassigned. Repeatedly, this had led to feelings of remorse by both the machine in question, as well as its separate cohorts. Feelings of bereavement were especially intriguing. This would be felt by owners if the Reploid was destroyed either by a maverick, or brought down by hunters for its own maverick activity. When mavericks could be brought in from hunter base, Lansky would make attempts to conduct cognitive therapy on the accused. If a virus was not the case, a complete recovery often ensued. Although the Reploid was labeled a recovering maverick, it would be released back into public service only within a matter of months. This method would save employers and insurance companies the expense of replacement, and eventually became a common method, only reserving decommission if Lansky's treatment attempt proved ineffective. However, Lansky was not without his critics. One political cartoonist drew a picture of him in a stereotypical Freudian therapy setting. He drew Lansky in a tweed jacket while writing in a notepad and sitting in an armchair. Beside him was a desktop computer lying on a couch. Lansky was called the computer counselor and was criticized by opponents of continued Reploid production as well as by those who saw Reploids as only commodities and tools rather than beneficial and legitimate members of society. Lansky in the past had worked closely with the developers of Reploids. He observed how a Reploid is programmed not through the traditional means by which a mechanoid had prefabricated software loaded into them, but instead a very basic personality template. Once loaded, it was then given simulated situations in which to operate. In essence, the Reploid was given an education and even life circumstances. It was then revealed to him that the template was a basic gender-based behavior and emotion program. Once installed in the computer, which acted as the Reploid's first body, the entity within began to learn. During this time, a Reploid's software was free to explore and even make mistakes. The basic Reploid is given a complete K-12 education, and Reploids initially created for skilled work would then be given additional education for the type of position they would fill. The amazing aspect of Reploid education is that it was completed in as little as 3 months for those created for labor roles, while higher position Reploids were completed in only 1 to 3 weeks longer, depending on what the knowledge level was needed for the position. All of this was completed while the Reploid's body was manufactured. Sadly, some Reploids came out bad. In a similar model to Erickson's stages of human psychosocial development, Reploids went through a similar process. The first mavericks that were not virus cases tended to have troubled childhoods. Many Reploids who had similar infancy periods did not always go maverick, but the ratio of those who had ideal childhoods to non-ideal childhoods was a significant one. At its highest, for every 1 ideal childhood maverick, there were 4 that were non. To reduce the possibility of maverick occurrence, those Reploids who did not make the cut had their developmental programs erased and the templates had to be reloaded from scratch to reduce developer expense. Lansky was once offered permission to conduct basic classical conditioning experiments with one of the defective developmental programs. The experiment proved successful in not only forming conditioned responses to once unconditioned stimuli, but that the program acted in accordance to what its age would be at a similar human level. The program, who was scheduled for demolition, was 1 month into its completion. At this point, its actions were akin to those of a 6-year-old child. Like many people who interact with these entities on an individual basis, Lansky developed an attachment to the young program. He was present for the demolition once the experiment was complete a week later. At this time, Lansky shared one more conversation with the program through the computer speakers and microphone.
Mr. Darrel?
A young-sounding electronic voice emitted from the console.
You told me that we'll be going to sleep today. What do you mean by going to sleep?
Darrel grimaced and clenched his fists as he attempted to keep his emotions at bay. "Well, Simon," he said in a soft, quivering voice, "you are going to a place where there are lots of kids who are just like you."
Have I been bad?
An inquisitive voice echoed from the speakers. Darrel shook his head despite knowing the entity could not see him do so. "No," he said softly. "You have not been bad. It's just that the other people here know that you are more special than the others."
Will I wake back up?
"Yes, you will." Darrel hated himself for uttering such a blatant lie to what he saw as a child.
Will you be here when I do?
"I don't know, Simon. The synthesized voice seemed to become more distressed. "I would never hate you, Simon. You are too special to be hated by anybody."
Do you think the others might hate me when they see me?
Darrel fought to maintain his composure. "No. You'll make a lot of new friends while you are asleep, and you'll make many more when you wake up."
I'm scared, Mr. Darrel.
"It's okay to be scared, Simon. But be brave, and you'll be just fine."
Don't go, Mr. Darrel.
The voice was somewhat pleading now. One of the technicians came to Darrel and placed a hand lightly upon his shoulder. "It's time, Mr. Lansky," she said. "I have to go now, Simon," he said, struggling to maintain his composure. "But be strong, and be brave."
Please stay, Mr. Darrel.
The voice begged. "Goodbye, Simon." Darrel rose from his place before the console, his countenance forlorn. He walked over to the technician who had cued him earlier. "Please make it quick," he said, his voice quivering with the self-hatred for his helplessness in a role for what he believed to be infanticide. The technician nodded in stoic compliance. As Darrel walked down the hall, he heard the final frantic cries of the young replay program.
I'm scared, Mr. Darrel. I'm scared.
The technician pressed the computer's main power to off, and the young voice residing within was silenced forever.